Welcome everyone to our Level 3 Assessor, the live session. In this session, we're going to cover about over an hour. We're going to cover different things about the course. Just before we run over the agenda, just a few brief ground rules. So please keep giving me your questions in the chat. While Mark is presenting, a lot of the questions may get answered. So that's why I will kind of gather the questions, and any questions that aren't answered during the presentation, we'll do a Q&A at the end. So don't worry, they'll get covered. Anyone causing any online disturbance or hassle will be blocked from the session. And yeah, questions will generally be answered at the end. So please do listen throughout the presentation in case we cover the content earlier. Okay, so in this session, basically we're going to cover an introduction to the course. So you find answers to different things like what kind of sectors or jobs it applies to, what the course contains, you know, just a brief history about the course, what we used to call it and what it is now, and suggested combinations and different pre-course requirements. So it's a modular course with 3 different units, as you may know. So the kind of units that you pick obviously depends on your situation and what kind of learners you assess. So Mark will be going over that as well. Obviously, a lot of you, the questions we're getting from existing and potential candidates are surrounding the Corona lockdown, and obviously not everyone is able to access their work. So Mark will be covering an entire section on how we will be able to assess you remotely, and what kind of evidence we will be looking at for the various units in the current situation. And obviously we'll be going through the different units as well and giving you an idea of the kind of evidence and the different things that are required. So we're going to cover a lot. So just not to waste any more time, I'm handing it over to Mark. Mark Breslin is our training manager. Greatly accomplished, a lot of qualifications. Mark is a lead verifier, a chartered auditor, has international experience in multiple countries, including the Middle East and Africa, as well as obviously the UK, and in different sectors as well. So very experienced, and as training manager, Mark is heavily involved in, bless you, Mark, heavily involved in the policies, and as you may have seen on our website, we do have a COVID-19 assessment strategy and all of that. So Mark is involved with all of that. So definitely the person you want to hear from about all of these things. So Mark, that's enough for me. Over to you, and keep an eye on the questions in the chat. So until then.
Thank you, Sana. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. I won't go over what we're going to cover, obviously, because Sana's already done that, so we'll get stuck right in. So in terms of assessor awards and natural certificate, previous to 2013, it was known as a D32, D33, and finally the A1. And all these qualifications were more or less the same as they are now. There are minor differences. It's mostly terms of phrase within the assessment criteria that were changed, but more or less the same qualifications. Okay, so there's nothing really to dwell on in terms of there. As I mentioned there, 2013, the course was changed to the present course, which is now grouped as TAQA, T-A-Q-A, and it covers teaching, assessment, and quality assurance. And obviously, the assessment qualification, the CAVA qualification, deals primarily with assessment. Having a qualification is quite unique, the full qualification, but I mean, it really depends on what you intend to do with the qualification. But having the full complement of units enables you to assess learners and workers within the actual place of work, on work competence, and also within the classroom environment as well. And really, I know we'll go into more detail later, but the main difference here is the methods that you use to assess your learners. Okay. And again, the qualification is suitable across a wide variety of sectors, but specifically it can be used within endpoint assessment, within apprenticeships, and other associated sectors. Okay, but again, there's a wide variety of ways you can use a qualification, and a wide variety of subjects on qualifications require fully qualified assessors to obviously deliver and assess their qualifications. So a bit more detail. We have the first unit, which is the Unit 1, Award and Understanding the Principles and Practices of Assessment. Okay, and again, each of the units you'll find consists of learning outcomes and assessment criteria, which is pitched at level 3. Some background: a learning outcome is what the learner will do. The assessment criteria is what the learner can do. Okay, so the learner, as we talk about it through the webinar, in this sense, is a trainer assessor, as in you, or potentially you. As I mentioned, each route consists of a combination of the following units. Unit 1, which is all about the theory, knowledge of assessment across learning and development. It can be taken prior to or with the other units 2 and 3. Okay, and there's nothing in the rule book to say that you have to complete Unit 1 before planning and completing Unit 2 and 3. The actual knowledge unit will go into more depth later on, okay, but really all you need to know at this stage, regardless of your job role, anyone can take Unit 1, because as I mentioned there, it only involves you completing some theory research and answering questions based on the knowledge aspects of assessment. In terms of Unit 2, okay, so this is the first performance unit. And again, this is all about assessing occupational competence within the work environment. This is 6 credits, okay, so again, it's quite a good qualification to have, along with obviously Unit 1. And the first 2 units together will lead to the award in assessing competence in the work environment. Okay, so Unit 1, Unit 2, if your main aim is assessing people within the work environment. Next we have Unit 3, okay, which is assessing vocational skills, knowledge and understanding. And this is where we mentioned previous that the assessment methods will deal with the classroom assessments such as projects, assignments, case studies. And again, we'll talk a bit more in detail later on, but just to sort of get you into thinking. The first and third units, okay, will lead to the award in assessing vocational related achievement. All right. The fourth slide you see here is a certificate in assessing vocational achievement. Okay, so what this is, it's not a separate qualification as such, as basically Unit 1, 2 and 3 grouped together. So that will give you the entire certificate. And again, as long as you have the potential and to collate the evidence relating to that assessment work within the workplace and that assessment work within the training environment, you can achieve the certificate. Again, we said it's quite straightforward in terms of evidence and requirements because they're very identical. As I say, it's just where, obviously, where you assess. The assessment qualification is based on the assessment cycle, and this is something that, if you haven't come across already, it sort of shines through certainly Unit 1 and most certainly Units 2 and 3 in terms of planning and completing and reviewing. And we'll just sort of give you some background on the assessment cycle. First of all, we have the initial assessment, and this is where you ascertain if your learner has any previous knowledge or experience of a subject or topic to be assessed. This information can be obtained through application forms or interviews that you may have with your learners prior to obviously planning an assessment. The results of this initial assessment will give you information regarding your learners, okay, which is always invaluable. and the specific assessment requirements they may have, you'll determine their learning style and any further training and support they may have. This process might not always be carried out by you, okay, but the information obtained must be passed on by you, okay. So obviously your involvement in the process is obviously valuable. The second stage of the assessment cycle is the assessment planning, okay, and this is very, very important in terms of ensuring that you have and you do conduct successful assessments. The assessment planning agrees suitable types and method of assessment, so you will then determine obviously which methods are best suited towards the learner that you've done that initial assessment on. Also will obviously involve setting appropriate target dates. If there's others that need to be involved within the assessment process, you will include them at this stage, such as colleagues or supervisors, and obviously following relevant organizational guidelines as well. The third stage is the actual assessment activity itself. And again, this relates to the methods used, i.e. is it assessor-led, for example, is it observation within the workplace or questioning, or it can be learner-led, for example, completing assignments, writing statements, or gathering appropriate evidence of competence. Obviously, as I'm sure if you're currently studying the qualification, you know that assessment can be formative, which means ongoing, or indeed summative, which is at the end. Next stage of a cycle is the assessment decision and feedback, again critical within the whole process. This is where making a judgment of success or otherwise will depend on the performance of the learner. Okay, and again, feedback is critical here, and it needs to be constructive, it needs to be motivational, developmental, and obviously there may be further actions that will develop from the feedback. Records need to be kept of this, of course, for future reference of what was assessed and what the decisions were. So that's, again, very important for future use. The final part of the assessment cycle is the review of progress. Okay, so again, what you can do at this stage is review the assessment plan, and again, obviously, you can update it as well. Things change; not every plan stays the same, so it can be updated. I mean, this is obviously an ongoing process until the learner completes their assessments or decides to leave. Reviewing progress with your learners will give you an opportunity to discuss any other issues that may be relevant to the progress. Okay, and again, reviewing the assessment activities used will give you the opportunity to amend them if necessary. So again, obviously, the main information to take from that is a flexible process, but on those stages, they do have to be completed in full. Okay. So in terms of remote evidence opportunities, now given obviously the current situation in terms of what we can do, for both units, there's a number of ways we can complete remote assessment as an assessor. I'm chatting about now. So as an assessor, you most certainly can complete an assessment plan. You can then share your assessment plan with your learners. There's no problem with that at all. It can be done via email, sent, and again, we've got obviously other technical capabilities these days, such as what we're using now, or Zoom, GoToMeeting, Skype, etc., where you would then discuss your assessment plans with your learners. Again, so that's quite easily done in terms of remote. So you don't have to be actually sitting within the same room. Standardization. So within units 2 and 3, there is a requirement for you to evidence following standardization procedures. So again, this can be done remotely as well. So if you can imagine, you can have a meeting, such as again what we're doing now, where you've got all participants will conduct a meeting in a normal way, as you would directly, and minutes of that particular meeting will suffice for evidence for standardization. So again, bear in mind, any form of communication with someone else, whether it's a learner, whether it's your colleagues, it can be done remotely. Okay, but again, I will hasten to add that anything that you want to do remotely or you think you can achieve remotely, please run it past your tutor initially, just so we're happy and content that what you're doing is going to result in VACSR. And for all you would-be assessors out there, obviously that's validity, authenticity, currency, sufficiency, and reliable. That's what we're looking to achieve at the end of the process. Feedback to learners, as I mentioned, again, once you complete your assessments with your learners, apart from the requirement of documented, recorded feedback with your learners, part of the course requires you to complete a video or be observed by an approved assessor or by your tutor. The feedback procedure and the content which you give to your learners based on your assessment activities. So for example, if a learner was completing, trainee assessor, was completing Unit 2 and Unit 3, there would be a requirement of an observation for Unit 2 and a separate observation for Unit 3. And again, this observation will form, for example, a report of your capability and giving that feedback to your learners. The top of the slide says remotely. Again, we can use Zoom, Skype, GoToMeeting, etc., where we can facilitate that and complete our observation using this method. Okay, because again, that's quite straightforward in terms of evidence gathering. In terms of assessment methods, now for Unit 2, which we'll again discuss more detail in a second, you need to complete certain assessment methods to achieve all the criteria for the unit. These are observation of learner within the workplace, questioning, and learner product evidence. Now you need to complete performance evidence for those three as a minimum across the assessments you do with your learners. Remotely, it can be difficult, okay, because you need to observe the learner completing that assessment. So you can imagine, in terms of technological capabilities, you need to record that particular observation with the learner completing that particular assessment. So it is quite tricky for Unit 2. In terms of product evidence, again, that can be done remotely, because when you imagine if the learner is producing something for you, the assessor, dependent what it is, it can be sent to you via email, via Dropbox, via Google Drive, and then once you receive, you can then complete your assessment decision on it. Okay, obviously it does depend what sector you're in and what your expertise in for Unit 2 within the workplace. So again, even though I say it can be done, it is possible getting done remotely, please have a chat with your tutor to confirm that it's acceptable. Okay. Questioning, quite easily, because you've got the option here of written and verbal questioning. And again, common sense tells you can do verbal questioning using remote means. You know, you can have your learners on the screen, on the camera, you're facing them directly, you're asking the questions, and they're giving you responses to the questions. Okay. And again, your questions will depend again on what the subject you're assessing the learners in. Okay. So that's the three you need to get performance evidence of for Unit 2. And really, the main one to consider there is the observation of the learner within the workplace. Okay, so that's the main one to consider there. In terms of Unit 3, this is quite straightforward actually in terms of remote evidence. As I mentioned before, assessment planning quite easily done remote for this unit, as is standardization, as is feedback to your learners based on your assessments. The assessment methods used for Unit 3 are generic in terms of what you can do. So you've got projects, you've got assignments, you've got questions, you've got skills test, you've got RPL, recognition of previous learning, all of which you can do to a certain extent remotely. It depends on your situation with the learners at that particular time, because you only need to choose 3, and it can be any 3 of those methods across the 4 assessments. Okay, so for example, again, using common sense, if your learner was completing an assignment, that can be sent to you remotely, and you can assess that assignment remotely and give feedback on it remotely. There's no issue with that at all. Okay, because I'm sure, if not already doing so, is happening at the minute. Okay. Now, considerations in regards to remote evidence is making sure that you shore up and tie up any loose ends in terms of authenticity. For example, emails showing communication between yourself and the learners, which show in turn the assessment records being transferred from you or from the learner to you, and the feedback being sent back if it's not done verbally via Zoom. It's just an example. Okay, so think about, again, remote opportunities, but make sure you keep records of communication as well, because it is quite important to make sure that the authenticity side of life, as well as obviously the validity and accuracy and sufficiency, is checked as well. Okay. Again, this slide sort of gives you an overview of the qualifications, probably in a better angle than before, of course. Okay, so you've got your Unit 1, okay, which I mentioned before, consists of 1 knowledge unit, which is understanding the principles and practices of assessment. There's a series of 8 questions, and all 8 questions are based around, as you would expect, the assessment criteria within the awarding body's qualification handbook. Okay. These assessment criteria are based from the functions, the principles, the planning, the doing, the given feedback, legislation based around assessment, and it functions off with reflection and CPD as well. Okay, so again, it's a fully holistically assessed series of questions, but it does test your knowledge on the principles and practices of assessment. Okay, we do offer our own LMS materials for you to use and study throughout this unit, but we also encourage our learners as well to do research. Okay, because research not only will qualify your answers, your explanations within the questions, but it'll also underpin any knowledge that you've seen in the LMS, and certainly it will increase your knowledge of assessment as you work your way through. Certainly, those people who intend to do Units 2 and 3, or Unit 2 or Unit 3, and haven't really touched assessment before, are recommended to certainly complete Unit 1 first, because it will give you that basic understanding and grounding in terms of the planning processes for assessment. The second qualification, the award in assessing competence in the work environment, and again, as mentioned previously, consists of 2 units. First one, knowledge, and the one's performance-based. Performance-based within the work environment. Okay, so your learners need to be actually in that work environment. 3 questions, okay, currently we have here, and the questions again are all based around the assessment criteria. So all your performance evidence will tick the requirements of that assessment criteria in terms of your implementation of assessment. So expected evidence here will be certainly your planning of assessment, and a lot of people pay lip service to it, but the assessment plan is probably the key document that you will use for completing this particular unit. An assessment plan comes in various forms. You may already use an assessment plan which is pre-populated, okay, within your work environment, which is fine. It'll still be reviewed and assessed, okay. However, we do offer templates in terms of assessment planning, because we do need to ensure that every assessment plan contains the critical elements such as the who, the what, the when, and the why. Because initially it is a briefing document for your learners to give them the best possible insight and intention for the assessment ahead. Okay, so it is quite a key document. Other documents in relation to Unit 2, as I mentioned earlier on, you have two groups, Group A and Group B of assessment methods. Group A, you have to complete, you have to give performance evidence across your 4 assessments, 2 with each learner. Observation within the workplace, questioning, and product evidence. Obviously, you can repeat one of those to make up 4 assessments, or you can use an optional one from Group B, which is witness testimony, learner statements, and professional discussion. No issue whatsoever in using all of them. Okay, there's no problem whatsoever, but again, I just sort of bear in mind that depending on your circumstances, you'll be giving yourself extra work to do if not needed. Okay, so entirely up to yourself, but as long as you're aware that Group A is the main one to focus on. Now, if you don't use any of Group B, I say not an issue, what you can do is complete a written statement, which will in itself evidence your understanding of using that assessment method within your own environment. Now, if you don't use it, again, don't worry, you can use a hypothetical example of using that particular assessment method. So just to sort of recap, assessment plan, which details Group A's assessment methods with each of your learners. 2 assessments for each learner. On the back of your assessments, you will then have assessment records. So a typical assessment record for an observation within the workplace would be some form of checklist with criteria, certainly. I mean, it's very good practice to have your criteria most likely listed down one side with actions that you would like to see within that particular environment and feedback located within there as well. That document obviously is your key to providing evidence for your observation. Okay, other information you will need to include with that will be your feedback to the learner based on that particular assessment. Now that can be included within that document if you wish, or you can have a separate assessor record document. And as again, we hasten to add that we do have templates which cover these, which you can use if you don't have your own within your current circumstance. Okay, so there's no issue at all. Next, obviously, product evidence. That can be evidenced through, for example, photographs. It can be evidenced through scans of documents that you've sent, PDF. So anything really that learner has produced off the back of the assessment plan. Obviously, all assessments have to be based on some form of criteria. You just can't rock in, for example, to the workplace and make assessments up. They need to be planned, need to be structured. So that product evidence that the learner has produced will be your evidence, along with the feedback relating to that product evidence. So you can see, again, a common thread which flows from the assessment plan right through to the performance evidence. Questioning, again, this can be quite easily done verbally. And if you're going to use a verbal form of assessment, recorded, okay, so you could use audio recording or video recording, either or, okay. If you're using audio recording, we do request a witness testimony from an independent observer who will watch the session and will then give a written testimony to the effect of who attended that session, where it was, and what the subject was, and obviously include contact details as well. Okay, so that's what you can use for questioning. Once complete, obviously, another element is the observation of ourselves on you as the assessor. And as I mentioned earlier in the slides, that would, for example, be facilitated by ourselves in the form of a Skype or WhatsApp, or not WhatsApp, sorry, GoToMeeting or Zoom, where we can actually all log in together and I can complete my observation, observing you, completing that feedback with your learners. Very easily done, no issue whatsoever. So that's more or less the process in terms of the award and assessing competence in the work environment. Supplementary and supporting documentation such as policies, procedures, which you use within your assessment practice will need to be evidenced as well. And again, there may be opportunities to and requirements to include professional discussions and written statements from yourself to shore up and to make more firm your evidence in terms of making sure it's authentic. Okay. But again, that's something that you can chat with your tutor about, because everyone's circumstance is different. Okay, there's no black and white as such. Okay, some cases may be slightly grey, where we can sort of introduce more assessment and evidence types to make sure your portfolio is sufficient for review by the RIQA and the awarding body EQA. Next qualification is the award in assessing vocational skills, knowledge and understanding. And again, this qualification consists of the knowledge unit, unit 1, and obviously the assessing vocational skills within the classroom environment, unit 3. Exact same format as I mentioned for unit 2. Okay, you still need to complete your assessment plans, no less critical at this stage. Your assessment plans will describe what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, when you're going to do it, why, etc., along with obviously the relevant criteria as well. The only difference this time is where you're assessing and the methods of assessment you are using, such as assignments, projects, case studies, skills test, assessments within a simulated environment, and recognition of previous learning. So with both learners this time, you can choose a minimum of any 3 of those assessment methods across the 4 assessments. Okay, you can use 4 if you wish, no issue at all, but a minimum of 3 have to be used. For those you don't use, as in performance evidence, you will then be required again to complete a written statement. Again, evidence your understanding of those methods within your work environment. And again, please don't be alarmed. It can be hypothetical examples from that. Types of evidence, fairly straightforward this time. For an assignment, it would be the learner's actual assignment that they completed. Now, obviously, it will be scanned and sent and attached onto the portfolio. But additional supporting evidence would be the policies, procedures, and criteria which you're using to make your judgments against. And obviously that all-important feedback record relating to that assignment as well. And again, depending on your assessment plan, you will have your target dates and review dates relating from your feedback on that as well. Very much part of the assessment cycle, the evaluation and feedback section. Again, other evidence for a case study, again, this can be documented if it's documented, or again, you can use remote opportunities, technology to complete those types of assessment also. Okay, basically going live with your learners online. Okay, but again, that type of session would need to be recorded. Okay, to add to your portfolio. Feedback as well can be done live, as I mentioned there, but again, you would need a written format of feedback as well. Whichever assessment method you choose to do, you still be required as in Unit 2 for your tutor to complete, or your approved assessor to complete, the observation of you completing your feedback to your learners based on your assessments. And again, we can use those ways as mentioned before in terms of the video conferencing facility. You can have your nominated assessor approved, and when they can then observe you completing that feedback session. Or we can do it live, such as this, where we could facilitate, or you can facilitate a meeting between you and the learner with your ELN tutor sitting in and completing the report during that time. Again, it's quite straightforward and easy to organize also. So in terms of the certificate, pretty straightforward, obviously, because it involves everything which I've mentioned before: Unit 1, Unit 2, and Unit 3. And again, there's no difference here. A couple of top tips, however. Completing Unit 2 and 3 together can be quite tricky. Now, no matter how confident and experienced an assessor you are, you still can get quite confused, especially if you've got external pressures from other work. So certainly if you are completing a CAVA, it's best practice to do 1 unit at any one time, and this is performance units. Okay, that'll avoid any confusion, because again, the assessment methods used need to be specific, okay, to those particular units. And when you start crossing over, it can get quite confusing, which can then lead to frustration and some confusion. Okay, so please bear that in mind if you do sign up, or you have signed up for the CAVA qualification. But again, obviously, the big one here is making sure that you've got the correct learners in their correct locations at the correct time, of course, that you wish to complete. And again, reinforcing the COVID-19 situation, because obviously it's changed a lot of assessment, particularly more so in Unit 2. Again, we're very flexible, as I mentioned before. Any approaches to assessment using video conferencing within the workplace, please discuss with your tutor to get the exact details, okay? Because what would need to happen there, for example, would be the video of you observing the learner completing the actual assessment needs to be completed and archived by ourselves. Okay, so again, everyone's situation is different, but what we can do is discuss it with your tutor, the specifics to that. Your registration dates, again, as we mentioned before, we will work with all our students to ensure you have ample opportunity to complete, either at this stage or when things begin to normalize more, and you do get those further opportunities on down the line, perhaps within the next month or two, or perhaps longer, to actually assess people within the workplace or indeed within the classroom if you're not or can't currently do it remotely. Okay, but again, we are very flexible, and we will make sure that you do complete your qualification, given obviously your own contribution as well. At this stage, I want to hand back to Sana.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mark. That was a lot of information, very informative, and I think quite an in-depth view of the whole qualification. So I'd ask everyone else, if you haven't actually put your questions yet into the chat, so please, you can either put it in the public chat or you can ask me a private question. If you don't want to ask it in the public chat, that's fine. I do already have a couple of questions, Mark, so I'm just going to fire away.
Mm-hmm.
So the first question, online assessment, what evidence can we get that the learner has completed the assignments? So I think what they're asking is, if somebody is assessing online, what kind of evidence can they actually give to prove that the learner has completed the assignments?
This would be obviously in relation to Unit 3, where assignments is used as assessment method. I think I did briefly mention there that would be an actual copy of the learner's assignment. Certainly there would be the relevant feedback that you've given to the learner based on their assignment. And obviously your assessment plan, as I mentioned, goes without saying, it all needs to tie in with the assessment plan. So in short, yep, the actual assignment the learner's completed, recorded feedback, assessment plan, and also the communication between yourself and the learner as well, perhaps in the form of an email. Now that's not critical, okay? So please don't panic in case you haven't got that record. But certainly we can use other means of assessment to clarify and confirm that part.
Thank you. I mean, it is very flexible. I think I've also seen people where they're using e-portfolio systems or
Yeah.
online evidence. They also attach screenshots and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not possible really to cover like every single type of evidence we can possibly accept, because just it's so vast, and it really just depends on each person's situation. But yeah, we can be flexible and we can accept multiple types of evidence. Okay, next question is, can we use more than one method of assessment in one assignment? I think what they mean is per unit. So, I mean, if you've asked the question, sorry, and if I've got it wrong, feel free to ask it again if you feel that your question has been covered properly. So I'll just repeat that for you again, Mark. So can we use more than one method of assessment in one assignment or unit?
Yes, very much so, because the assessment criteria for units 2 and 3 encourage use of holistic assessment. So, for example, you may use observation and questioning at the same time when you're observing, obviously, a learner within the work environment, and you can get a tick in the box for using both of those methods. So, yeah, if that's certainly what you meant by your question, yeah, no problem at all.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, when exactly do we need to assess the learners during our qualification, and is there a time limit? Because obviously, can you just cover briefly the situation when people kind of, if they've registered prior to the lockdown, or what if somebody has actually registered after the lockdown, and you know, where they stand with assessing their learners in that situation?
Obviously, you can assess your learners at any stage, okay? So you don't have to have completed Unit 1 prior to completing any of your assessments, okay? So pre-lockdown, if you had one of your observations already done, okay, that's fine. After lockdown, we can look at other methods of, for example, if you've got one observation left of one of your learners, we can look at another method of you observing that learner remotely. Okay, but again, I hasten to add, everybody, their situation is different. And really, what I'm trying to say is you need to have that chat with that your tutor. But to sort of answer the question, your assessments can be completed any time, no problem. But we do have a limit, a limit of 3 months prior to registration, if that's the case of your course. But we cannot change evidence retrospectively, if that makes sense. So, for example, if you registered on Monday and you said, Mark, I completed an assessment 2 months ago with one of my learners within the workplace, I would say that's fine, but I would need to see all of that evidence relating to that particular assessment. All of the evidence would need to cover all of the criteria relating to the planning, the completing, and the feedback of the qualification for you to get a tick in the box for that particular learner. Okay, because at this stage, prior to registration, you couldn't go back and change your planning. That's not authentic. It's not valid. Okay, so that's where we need to be sure that you can meet all the criteria. That's in the case for one learner. You would still need to complete another learner's observation or another learner's set of assessments during the registration period. Okay, so they both can't be prior to you registering for the course. I'm not saying it can't be done, but there's strict criteria in relation to that. Okay.
Okay, yeah. So one set of evidence can be prior to registration within reason, but obviously I think the key is that once you're registered, you just need to be able to like schedule that call and speak to your tutor and
sure.
discuss the situation. That's the key thing. Okay, next question we have is about ESOL, teaching ESOL, English as a secondary language, and teaching level 1, 2, 3, community interpreting. Which units of the assessor qualification, which combination would you think suits that area of specialism?
I would, well, it depends. I would need to see, obviously, the specification for the qualification to get a detailed answer on that, okay? But, and I don't want to be giving you half answers, but I would imagine it's more towards Unit 3. If the person asking that question wants to drop me an email, no problem whatsoever. What I'll do is I shall get you the definitive answer and let you know. Okay, I don't want to tell you the wrong information, but I would be pointing probably towards Unit 1 and Unit 3.
Okay, brilliant. So most likely Unit 1 and 3, but just in case, because I know ESOL would be Unit 1 and 3, but I'm not sure about the community interpreting qualification, what that really...
That most certainly, I would probably say Unit 2, Unit 1, Unit 2.
Might be Unit 2, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you can actually shoot us an email, then Mark can actually answer that question more specifically after looking into the qualification. Okay, next question. Would I be able to add the tutor to the Moodle learning and assessment platform at my place of work and then via Microsoft Teams meeting display and talk my tutor through the evidence on the site? So that's interesting. So if there is an online system, can they invite the tutor into the online system and talk them through the evidence rather than screenshots or something, or would they still do it live?
To be honest, yeah, we can do that, but we'd also require the screenshots as well, because we would need to have some form of evidence within the portfolio relating to it. But that wouldn't be an issue unless there's GDPR issues from your side. But that's something, again, I would like to talk to the person about more specifically. But yeah, I mean, that can be that can be done. I think we can do that, but there may be a requirement of the screenshots as well. Okay.
Okay, yeah, and I guess if you're talking with the tutor through the system, the tutor can also kind of suggest, okay, let's have a screenshot of this or that. And
exactly.
Obviously,
yeah.
And let's say if there are GDPR issues, how would we deal with that? So could we do something like a professional discussion or something?
Yeah, for certain parts, but I was still for the portfolio to be robust going forward for review. I would certainly like some documented evidence of the of your assessments, and what we're lacking in there, we can back up with professional discussion. Certainly, there's no problem with it. But I mean, there's ways around GDPR in terms of names and details. We can get those blackened out that are anonymous. But again, it's something we can look in more detail. But certainly, it's not a no. It's certainly something we can work around.
Brilliant. Okay. Yes, we can discuss the types of evidence. Thank you, Mark. Okay. So another question is about standardization. So can you please elaborate on standardization and perhaps suggest what kind of evidence they can show with regards to standardization?
Yeah. Standardization has come to the fore with training providers and awarding bodies probably within the last 5 years, and something certainly that you will see and hear a lot more of, if not already. Standardization means basically a benchmark for assessors, for IQAs, for trainers within an organization, that they assess to the same level of ability, standards, criteria. So activities of standardization would be peer observations of each other, completing assessments. It could be reviewing policies, procedures within a centre. So they're standardised towards national regulations and best practice. It can be blind marking. It can be double marking learners' work to make sure the assessors are assessing and not over-assessing or under-assessing, but assessing in the same ways. So yeah, a sort of benchmarking is probably the best phrase to use there. Evidence-wise, we can do this by a professional discussion where you can actually let me know and tell me about your understanding of standardization and give examples from your own practice. Or even better, you can use an agenda or anonymous minutes from a standardization meeting that you've attended. And I would probably suggest that most people have. But if not, again, I don't want you to panic. We can do that by professional discussion. And certainly that would tick that criteria.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. I hope that answers your question. If not, please, if you feel like your question hasn't been answered properly, please feel free to type it again. Okay. Will the session be recorded? Yes, the session is recorded and is available for you to replay. So once the session ends, you will get a link to replay this. What if somebody? Sorry, Mark. I just didn't think that that was a very simple answer. Okay, so what if somebody is assessing online? So what kind of evidence or how would we assess that?
I'm assuming this will be Unit 3, because it won't really count for Unit 2 as such. Again, it depends on what your circumstances are. Let's take it for red that it's Unit 3. Okay, we can answer Unit 2 if it comes back and tell us Unit 2. So Unit 3, again, as I mentioned there about the assignment, if you're assessing online, your assessment plan's done online, remotely, no problem at all. Whatever assessment method you use will ultimately be your evidence. For example, that assignment, that project that the learner has completed, that case study that the learner has completed, that skills test that the learner's completed, your evidence will come from that. So it will be those documents, it will be those screenshots, it will be your assessment plan, it will be your feedback records, and perhaps your action plan. Okay, so the way I always like to explain to learners is, think of your tutor as a 3-year-old, okay, and you're trying to explain to the 3-year-old what you've done and how you've done it. So you want to collate as much evidence. Obviously, not as much evidence. Obviously we don't want to go sort of over-assess by any means, but try and think along the lines of, you're trying to explain to the 3-year-old what you've done and here's how I've done it. Okay, but again, that sort of thing we can shore up during initial interviews or any stage in the course at all. You just need to schedule a call, and that sort of thing can be tied up in 5 or 10 minutes. Okay, so Unit 3, I'm referring to. Unit 2, as I mentioned before, there's some aspects we can do remotely. There's others that cannot be done at this stage. I hasten to add as well. That can be done probably down the line.
Okay, so thank you, Mark. And what if somebody's institution is completely closed down and they don't have access to anything currently?
Well, obviously, apart from us making sure we stand by and make sure we give you ample opportunity, even if it goes beyond the registration period, we have ways we can address that. We can, the only thing we can advise there is to try and reach out to other training providers. And again, from my own experience and from assessing people and teaching people through the years, that training providers can be quite willing to give volunteer assessors a hand up, okay? Because what I would say, obviously, is whatever your expertise is, let the training providers let you target specifically to do that particular qualification. Because I know it's pretty bad if your institution is closed down. It's a matter of having to refocus and trying to get another method, wrong word to use, another avenue of assessment. But certainly we'll stick by you during the process and, be flexible as we can.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Mark. And a really good question, actually, a very common one that a lot of people actually come up with. Can you provide evidence where you are working across multiple providers?
Yes. Yep. For example, if one assessor is with one group or training provider, another assessor is with another training provider, no problems whatsoever. There's no issue.
No, the learners are with different, as in if one assessor is, for example, if I understand correctly, if let's say I'm doing the assessor course, but I'm working for 2 or 3 different companies. So can I provide evidence from the different companies I work for?
Well, as long as you're learners, yeah, that's fine. So I mean, all we need evidence is of 2 learners, okay, and your evidence is built around it. So basically, all your 2 assessments for that particular learner number 1 need to be from the same institution. Obviously, can't be from 2. Your second learner can be from a different place. That's no problem.
Okay, brilliant. So The one learner has to obviously have their entire evidence from the one institution, but obviously different learners for the different units can be from different providers.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
Brilliant. Thank you. And do apprenticeships count?
Oh, yes, very much so for Unit 2, yeah.
Okay, so that would be for the Unit 2.
Well, obviously Unit 3 as well. They do crossover.
Okay, all right, okay. I think that answers that question. I did get one question, but I wasn't exactly sure. I asked the person to rephrase. I wasn't sure what they were asking. Okay, there's another question. Okay, so can you tell us how many assessment, I think they mean assessment methods per unit they need to evidence?
Yeah, so for Unit 2, at least 3, minimum 3, but the minimum 3 have to... Sorry?
Can you give an example, like observation?
Yeah. So the minimum of 3 have to be from Group A, as I mentioned there. So Group A is observation of the learner within the workplace, questioning, and product evidence. So those 3 methods you have to evidence at least for Unit 2. You can certainly have a 4th from Group B, which was witness testimony, professional discussion, and learner written statement. Unit 3, you've got the skills test, projects, assignments, case studies, and assessments in simulated environments, and the recognition of previous learning. So you've got 6 there, a minimum of 3 across your 4 assessments. So in simple terms, 3 for each unit, at least, across the 4 assessments.
Oh, okay, so 3 per unit, and by the units you mean the Unit 2 and the Unit 3?
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Okay, so that's 3 assessment methods per unit, and obviously we'll give you that list that Mark just mentioned. Brilliant, Mark, that was a good answer for that. So, okay, so we're nearly out of time. Are there any other questions, or have I missed something? Or, yep, we've got another one. Okay, I am assuming you cannot assess those you have taught. Is this correct? And is it the same for apprenticeships?
Not quite sure what...
I think, you know, the way, like you might be teaching a learner as well as assessing them. So is that possible? Or
Yeah. No, I don't see nothing wrong with it, no. I mean, at the end of the day, or the tutor will be assessing your ability to assess. So irrespective of training, I mean, because most people do both roles, aren't they? Dual roles. So
yeah. And is it the same for apprenticeships?
Yeah, I think so. No, I think it's fine. No, I don't see what issue there would be with it. No, it doesn't have to be. I mean, as long as you're planning the assessment and completing actual assessments, regardless of who taught them, I think that's fine.
Brilliant. Okay, so I think everyone's really happy with that. So thank you, Mark. So I think that question resonated with a couple of people. Thank you very much for the information. We are literally 30 seconds left, so I'm just going to end this. Thank you to Mark for your time and for all the information and for answering the questions so well. A very, very quick one, voice recording will use evidence for professional discussion. So I think can a voice recording do as evidence for professional discussion? Of
course, no problem at all, as long as it has that witness testimony.
Okay, brilliant. So it needs to have a witness testimony to prove it happened. So that's it from us. Everyone, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for your engagement and thank you for your questions. If any of your questions are unanswered, please feel free to email us. You will get the details in an email and also on screen as soon as this session ends. And we will definitely get back to you. For registered students, I think the key is speak to your tutor. And if you're not registered, Mark, can they book a call with a tutor if they're not registered?
Absolutely, no problem at all. That's no issue.
Yeah, brilliant. So just get in touch with us if you have any further questions. Email us, and if necessary, we'll set up a call with you with another tutor. So that's it from us. thank you again, and stay safe.